Chapter 4120. Please enter the text. The next moment, Chu Jinfeng glanced at Ren Zimei reluctantly, and then quickly turned in another direction. At the same time, the traces of his aura also became stronger. Seeing Chu Jinfeng leave like this, Ren Zimei's tears suddenly burst out and she hurriedly shouted, "Jinfeng!" However, Chu Jinfeng seemed to have made up his mind and disappeared from Ren Zimei and Ren Zimei's sight without looking back. Ren Ziheng pulled Ren Zimei and quickly left, saying, "Zimei, you must not disappoint Jinfeng's good intentions. Now as long as you can still live, that is the best." Ren Zimei left in another direction under Ren Ziheng's strength, but her tears could not help falling. The scenes of her time with Chu Jinfeng flashed across her mind one by one, causing her heart to tremble constantly. She could not help but regret. If she had known, she would have treated Chu Jinfeng better. At least, she would not have left the regrets today. Or if she died with Chu Jinfeng like this, perhaps she would be more relieved. Otherwise, facing such a Chu Jinfeng, how could she be happy? Not long after Ren Ziheng and Ren Zimei left, they heard the fluctuation of essence power coming from afar. The two people's hearts immediately sank. They understood that Chu Jinfeng had been caught up by the other party. Ren Zimei could not help but sob, her heart aching to the extreme. Ren Ziheng looked at Ren Zimei's appearance, and a trace of struggle flashed in his eyes, saying, "Zimei, do you want to go back?" He was very clear that the relationship between Ren Zimei and Chu Jinfeng did not come easily. They had known each other for so long, and it was only during this period of time that they truly got together. Even though this time together was not considered very long, their feelings were extremely deep. Hearing Ren Ziheng's words, Ren Zimei was slightly stunned, then nodded and said, "Yes." Even if the result after going was death, she was also willing, as long as she could die together with Chu Jinfeng. "Okay, then let's go back together," Ren Ziheng said. He found that he also could not harden his heart, and could not watch Chu Jinfeng die for them. If they were together, at least they could still fight. As early as when he had just joined Penglai Palace, he had already become friends with Chu Jinfeng. After these years of getting along, they were already real brothers. If he was so afraid of death, he would not be able to forgive himself. "Big brother, you should go." "I will go alone," Ren Zimei said. She no longer cared about life and death, but she could not implicate Ren Ziheng. Ren Ziheng smiled faintly. "Now that things have come to this, could it be that I can still let my little sister go alone? Let's go together. No matter what the result is, we have to give it our all." "Big brother." Ren Zimei's eyes were red. This feeling was too painful. On one side was Chu Jinfeng, and on the other was Ren Ziheng. She really couldn't make up her mind. "Don't think too much. Let's go back. It's fine as long as we don't regret it." Ren Ziheng looked at Ren Zimei with eyes full of tenderness and love. He only had Ren Zimei as his family. All along, what he had hoped for the most was to help Ren Zimei find a good man. As long as Ren Zimei was happy, everything was fine. Although he knew that this decision was impulsive and irrational, he still made the decision. Most of the time, humans were still emotional. If they could maintain their rationality all the time, they wouldn't be human anymore. Chapter 4121. After making their decision, Ren Ziheng and Ren Zimei no longer hesitated, and immediately rushed in the direction of the Yuanli movement. Qian Feilong and the rest caught up to Chu Jinfeng only to find that he was alone. They could not help but frown. They did not expect him to play such a trick at such a time. "You're quite self-sacrificing, aren't you? You'd rather die to protect them?" Qian Feilong stared coldly at Chu Jinfeng, his eyes filled with icy murderous intent. He hated Chu Jinfeng to the extreme. If it was not for this damned bastard sneak attack, he would not have been injured. Chu Jinfeng's face was gloomy, and his eyes flickered with intense hatred. "So what? Do you think I'll be as cold-blooded as a despicable and shameless bastard like you?" "Humph." Qian Feilong snorted coldly. "Do you think you'll be able to buy enough time for them? This training ground is so big. If they want to escape to the teleportation formation, it won't be done in a short time. In this time, it'll be enough for us to catch up to them. When that time comes, they'll still be on the road to death." Looking at Chu Jinfeng's fearless look, The malicious light in Qian Feilong's eyes intensified. Originally, I only wanted to give you a quick death. However, your actions just now have thoroughly angered me. So, I've decided to let you experience what it means to live a life worse than death. Hearing Qian Feilong's words, Chu Jinfeng could not help but frown. He asked, "What do you want to do?" "What do I want to do?" Qian Feilong noticed the change in Chu Jinfeng's expression, and the smile on his lips widened. "According to my judgment, you should like the woman who came with you very much, right?" Chu Jinfeng's expression changed slightly. "Why are you asking this?" In fact, he knew in his heart that although he had purposely changed the direction to buy some time for Ren Zimei and Chu Jinfeng, it was still unknown whether he would succeed. "What do you think is the most painful way to make a woman suffer?" Qian Feilong's smile became even more wretched and smug. The two cultivators behind him also laughed evilly. Seeing this, Chu Jinfeng's expression suddenly turned ugly. He immediately charged towards Qian Feilong. "You despicable and shameless fellow." Qian Feilong sent Chu Jinfeng flying with a punch and said disdainfully, "You want to protect the woman you like with your little strength? Dream on. After we kill you, we'll send those two people to accompany you. It's just that woman might be a little late. After all, she's quite pretty." Chu Jinfeng's eyes turned red. He felt that Qian Feilong might really do such a thing. Whenever he thought of that possibility, he wanted to tear this fellow before him into pieces. Even so, he still couldn't vent his anger. "I'll kill you." Chu Jinfeng got up and charged at Qian Feilong once again, the sword in his hand stabbing at his opponent without hesitation. Boom! With a flying kick, Qian Feilong snatched Chu Jinfeng's sword and stabbed it into his body. "You good for nothing, you'd better meet the king of hell as soon as possible." As the sword pierced his body, Chu Jinfeng's eyes widened. However, his hands were still wrapped tightly around Qian Feilong's leg, refusing to let the latter leave. Chapter 41-22. Qian Feilong and the others originally did not put Chu Jinfeng in their eyes, but after seeing Chu Jinfeng's stubbornness, they could not help but frown. "This guy is really crazy." Qian Feilong looked at the guy who was hugging his legs tightly, and a trace of disgust flashed in his eyes. "What a hateful guy. I'll let you die a quick death." Qian Feilong took out his weapon and immediately prepared to stab Chu Jinfeng. This kind of annoying dog skin plaster. He had to get rid of him completely. When Ren Ziheng and Ren Zimei rushed back, they saw this scene. Especially when they saw Chu Jinfeng vomiting blood and still hugging Qian Feilong's legs tightly, not letting him leave. Ren Zimei's tears flowed down like a broken string of pearls. "Stop!" Ren Ziheng shouted loudly. Hearing Ren Ziheng's voice, Qian Feilong could not help but turn his head. After seeing that Ren Ziheng and Ren Zimei had actually returned, a trace of surprise flashed in his eyes. "Oh, I didn't expect you to be so loyal. Actually coming back at this time. Just in time to save us a trip to chase you." Qian Feilong's face showed a trace of a satisfied smile. He might as well take advantage of this time to catch them all in one fell swoop, saving him a lot of effort. After seeing that Ren Zimei and Ren Zimei had actually returned, Chu Jinfeng's face flashed with a strong sense of surprise, and then said absent-mindedly, "Why did you come back?" He had done everything he could to buy some time with great difficulty, but Ren Ziheng and Ren Zimei had returned. Didn't that mean that everything was in vain? "Jinfeng." Ren Zimei looked at Chu Jinfeng with tears in her eyes. She clearly noticed that Chu Jinfeng's waist was constantly bleeding. Her heart was in so much pain, and it seemed that her whole person, even breathing, had become incomparably difficult. "You are too stupid." Chu Jinfeng sighed. His whole person looked unusually helpless, but his eyes could not help but redden. Ren Ziheng looked at the miserable Chu Jinfeng in front of him, and when he looked again at Qian Feilong, his eyes were also surging with hatred. "It's all because of these hateful guys. Jinfeng, even if we have to go underground together today, with us accompanying you, you won't be lonely." Back then, the three of them had been traveling together. Even if they went underground, the three of them should continue to be together. The corners of Chu Jinfeng's eyes gradually became moist. He hoped that Ren Ziheng and Ren Zimei would be able to leave safely, but after seeing them return like this, he couldn't help but feel moved. "Papa." Qian Feilong clapped his hands with a smile and pretended to be moved. What a scene of brotherly affection. It's really touching. The other two cultivators could not help but chuckle. A weakling would always be a weakling. The affection shown at this moment was nothing more than a joke in their eyes. Evil is doomed to destruction. Qian Feilong, you will die a miserable death in the future. Ren Zimei's eyes were cold and ruthless. A bone-deep killing intent surged in her chest. The guy in front of her was the person she hated the most. Qian Feilong chuckled. You don't have to worry about whether I will die miserably in the future. However, today all three of you will die in my hands. Attack! Qian Feilong waved his hand, and the two cultivators behind him immediately drew their weapons. Chapter 41-23. Ren Zimei and Ren Ziheng were the first to step forward. The two of them were now completely surrounded by hatred. If they could, they really wanted to chop these fellows in front of them into minced meat. Qian Feilong looked disdainfully at Chu Jinfeng, who was sprawled on the ground, and said, You're now at death's door. I'll give you a chance to see with your own eyes how they'll die to save you. This sentence undoubtedly pierced Chu Jinfeng's heart fiercely. If it were not for him, Ren Zimei and Ren Ziheng would not have rushed back at a time like this. Even though they might not be able to escape successfully, even if they escaped, at least they still had a slim chance of survival. However, they had given up this slim chance of survival for him. Bang bang bang. After Ren Ziheng and the others exchanged blows, the two of them unleashed their strongest battle prowess. Perhaps the hatred in their hearts was too strong, so when they exchanged blows, their auras were extremely shocking. The two cultivators had originally been very disdainful of Ren Ziheng and Ren Zimei. However, after this exchange, they had no choice but to put away their contempt. This was because under such circumstances, if they were even the slightest bit careless, they could really capsize in the gutter. Although Ren Ziheng and Ren Zimei were not considered top-notch experts in Penglai Palace, they often trained, and their combat power was definitely not weak. What's more, the two of them were brother and sister. The tacit understanding between them was amazing. Boom! Under the combined attack of Ren Ziheng and Ren Zimei, one of the cultivators was sent flying. Blood flowed from the corner of his lips. Qian Feilong could not help but frown when he saw this. He had thought that the two of them would be enough to deal with Ren Ziheng and Ren Zimei. He never thought that they would be the ones to teach them a lesson. His expression instantly turned very ugly. When Chu Jinfeng saw that Ren Ziheng and Ren Zimei were actually able to defeat one of the cultivators, his eyes flashed with joy. Ren Ziheng and Ren Zimei looked at each other, but they did not feel very happy about this situation. This was because they knew very well that even if the two cultivators were dead, they would not be able to deal with Qian Feilong alone. Everything that they had done now could only be said to be a little bit of payback. As long as they could make the other party unhappy, they would be happy. Two pieces of trash. Qian Feilong looked at his two teammates with dissatisfaction. Their cultivation was clearly not weaker than the other parties, but they still lost. How embarrassing. After being reprimanded by Qian Feilong, the faces of the two cultivators turned very ugly. However, when they thought about how much stronger Qian Feilong was than them, they could only swallow their anger, even if they were unconvinced. Since they can't get rid of you, I'll have to do it myself. Qian Feilong slowly unsheathed his weapon and looked at Ren Ziheng and the other man in front of him. I didn't expect you two to have some ability in your last desperate struggle. However, in the face of absolute power, you two are still no match for me. Seeing that Qian Feilong was prepared to personally take action, the expressions of Ren Ziheng and the other man turned grave. Zimei, be careful, Ren Ziheng said. Ren Zimei nodded. Big brother, even if we lose our lives in the end, as long as we can get back some interest, that's good enough. Chapter 41-24. Qian Feilong found it laughable when he saw the two of them giving it their all. If their cultivation was not high enough, it would be useless no matter how hard they tried. They could only blame themselves for not working hard enough in their cultivation, which caused their cultivation to be inferior to his. Ding! 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 Unfortunately, they'd already realized that Qian Feilong's strength was extremely powerful at the instant they'd fought against him. Merely his strength was already not something that they could contend against. The gap between the Starlight Realm and the Purple Realm was like a chasm that could not be crossed. Bang! Qian Feilong slammed his palm on Ren Zime's body, and she fell heavily to the ground. She could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood. The air was filled with the faint smell of blood. Seeing that Ren Zime was injured, Chu Jinfeng and Ren Ziheng could not help but call out, "Zime!" In the next moment, Qian Feilong attacked Ren Ziheng. He kicked Ren Ziheng's body several times in succession, causing Ren Ziheng's body to fall heavily to the ground, leaving a long trail on the ground. Qian Feilong stood up straight and looked at Chu Jinfeng and the other two who were all on the ground. The disdain in his eyes grew. A bunch of laughable trash. He clapped his hands and felt that it was as easy as blowing off dust. Ren Zime struggled to get up. However, her internal organs were in so much pain that she could not even get up. Qian Feilong turned to look at Chu Jinfeng and said, "Haven't you always wanted to protect this woman? Then I'll kill her first and let you have a taste of pain." Chu Jinfeng and Ren Ziheng's expressions changed when they heard this. Ren Zime's face turned pale as well. At this moment, she felt that death was very close. Qian Feilong held his sword and slowly walked in front of Ren Zime. Ren Zime could not help but step back. Unfortunately, she could not move much in her current state. Qian Feilong stood still and looked at the emptiness in Ren Zime's eyes. He could not help but chuckle. "Don't be afraid. It won't be long before they join you." Ren Zime stared at Qian Feilong in front of her, and her gaze gradually became firm. "Big brother Jinfeng, I'll wait for you underground." "Qian Feilong, I won't let you go even if I become a ghost." Hearing Ren Zime's words, Qian Feilong's face turned cold, and the sword in his hand stabbed out without hesitation. "Die!" Chi. Ren Zime closed her eyes, but she did not feel any pain. On the contrary, she heard a groan in front of her. Ren Zime quickly opened her eyes and looked in front of her. She didn't know when Ren Ziheng suddenly stood in front of her. Qian Feilong looked at Ren Ziheng and frowned. "You're really in a hurry to die, do you think? I won't kill her just because you're standing in front of her? Big brother." Ren Zime looked at Ren Ziheng in horror. Her heart felt as if it had been squeezed by someone, and even breathing became difficult. "Big brother, how are you? Big brother." Ren Ziheng turned his head and looked at Ren Zime beside him. His voice was pale and weak. "Zime, big brother will wait for you underground." Chapter 41-25. Big brother, don't die. Ren Zime stared blankly at Ren Ziheng, who was lying in a pool of blood, and her tears flowed uncontrollably. Her heart ached, and she was filled with regret. She was like a puppet who had lost its soul, and her heart was filled with pain. Her big brother had died because of her. If she had not insisted on returning, Ren Ziheng would not have fallen into such a state. Ever since they were young, Ren Ziheng had always taken care of her in every way possible. She had always hoped that Ren Ziheng would find a gentle and virtuous sister-in-law. However, Xiren had now died for her sake. She looked at Qian Feilong again, and felt that this fellow was a demon. Because of this fellow, she had lost everything that she cherished the most. Chu Jinfeng looked at the scene, and his face turned pale, as if he had been hit by a heavy blow. Although he had already expected such a situation, seeing Ren Ziheng fall in front of him like this, he still felt that he could not accept it. Qian Feilong and the others looked at Ren Zime, and the others in agony, and their faces were filled with indifference. There was even a sense of satisfaction. Weaklings will always be weaklings. They could not even control their own life and death. "You bunch of good-for-nothings, you should have expected this to happen. I'll give you some time to say your goodbyes. I'm afraid that you won't be able to find each other in the underworld." Haha. Ren Zime glared fiercely at Qian Feilong. Her heart was filled with hatred. However, she was now a fish on the chopping block. No matter how much hatred she felt, it was useless. "I know that you're not convinced." Qian Feilong laughed icily as his eyes fell upon Ren Zime. "You should be glad that I'm not interested in you. Otherwise, if I were to rape you and kill you, wouldn't you hate me even more?" Hearing this, Ren Zime's face changed and a sense of fear crept into her heart. She could not bear such humiliation. She would rather throw her life away. That would be easier. Noticing the change in Ren Zimei's eyes, the smile in Qian Feilong's eyes deepened. You can die with your big brother. Just as he spoke, Qian Feilong's sharp sword stabbed towards Ren Zimei. Ding! Just as Qian Feilong's sharp sword was about to stab Ren Zimei, suddenly, a throwing knife blocked his sharp sword. Only a crisp sound was heard, and his attack towards Ren Zimei did not succeed. This sudden turn of events shocked Qian Feilong and Ren Zimei. They couldn't help but look at the source of the flying knife. Mo Yunjue, Ao Lingxiao, Xiren, and Shengguan Yingying slowly appeared in their line of sight. Seeing the appearance of Mo Yunjue and the other three, Ren Zimei and Chu Jinfeng's eyes flashed with a trace of joy. They had helpers. Qian Feilong couldn't help but frown when he saw the latter. His eyes flashed with surprise. He could not understand. Everyone had clearly split up to chase after these fellows. Moreover, according to their distribution, they should have been confident enough to completely kill these fellows. How could these guys still be alive? Although the four of them were injured and their injuries weren't light, the fact that they could still appear here alive was already very inconceivable. Senior Brother Run. Chapter 41-26. When Mo Yunjue and the others saw this scene, their faces could not help but darken. They had known Ren Ziheng for quite some time. As their senior, Ren Ziheng had always taken care of them. No matter what happened in Penglai Palace, Ren Ziheng would definitely inform them, as long as he heard the news. For such a long time, Ren Ziheng had never held back from them. It was precisely because of this that they also treated Ren Ziheng as a good brother. However, when they saw Ren Ziheng like this, they also felt uncomfortable in their hearts. Their eyes gradually turned red, as if something was going to fall at any time. When they looked at Qian Feilong again, their eyes were burning with raging flames of anger. This damned guy. Noticing everyone's expressions, Qian Feilong's gaze changed a little. Originally, he only treated Ren Ziheng and the others as playthings, and wanted to see them in incomparable pain. However, the other party suddenly had so many helpers. Although the other party's injuries were not light, once they joined forces, their combat power would not be weak. If he remembered correctly, this Mo Yunjue was a Starlight Realm cultivator, and his level was not low. Under such a comparison, he suddenly realized that the overall advantage that he originally had suddenly changed. On the contrary, the other party seemed to have gained a greater advantage. Qian Feilong was not the only one who realized this situation. The two cultivators behind him also realized this, and could not help but retreat a little. Xiren Yunjue, you must kill them. Shengguan Yingying's eyes were filled with anger. Previously, after they had escaped from their predicament, they had rushed over without stopping. At first, all of them were almost certain that they had no chance of surviving. It was only later that they realized that the situation was much worse than they had imagined. After escaping from Mu Zhe's hands, they immediately found Mo Yunjue and Ao Lingxiao. Although Mo Yunjue's cultivation was not comparable to the other parties, with the existence of the murderous aura, Mo Yunjue's ability to fight above his level was extremely powerful. This was clearly beyond the other party's expectations. Therefore, even when facing four cultivators, Mo Yunjue and Ao Lingxiao were still not at an absolute disadvantage. With the addition of Wen Xiren and Shengguan Yingying to the battle, the situation immediately changed. Therefore, after spending a lot of effort, they successfully escaped. However, they also paid a great price. After all, the counterattack of an Astral Radiance cultivator was still very terrifying. Even though they were already seriously injured, everyone didn't stop for even half a moment. They immediately rushed towards the direction of Ren Ziheng's group without stopping. Unfortunately, they were originally in different directions, so even if they rushed desperately, they still spent a lot of time. When they arrived, they saw this scene. Hearing Shengguan Yingying's words, Wen Xiren, Mo Yunjue and the others all nodded. Even though their combat strength had weakened, they were still confident in dealing with Qian Feilong's group of three. In the next instant, Mo Yunjue and the others took a step forward and charged towards Qian Feilong's group without hesitation. They were going to make those three bastards pay the price. Senior Brother Qian, the situation doesn't look good. What should we do? Chapter 4127. The two cultivators from the Crimson Moon sect immediately thought of retreating. Faced with such a great disparity in their powers, if they were to fight recklessly and lose their lives here, it would not be worth it at all. Furthermore, they had only wanted to kill Ren Ziheng and the others out of respect for Li Boyo. It had nothing to do with them at all. If they were to lose their lives because of this, it would not be worth it at all. When Qian Feilong saw Mo Yunjue and the others charging towards them, he shouted, "Let's go quickly." Qian Feilong immediately turned around and ran towards the back without any hesitation. At this moment, his heart was filled with confusion. He could not understand why these fellows would appear here together. Could it be that they had dealt with the other pursuers as well? If that was really the case, it would be too terrifying. Could it be that these fellows' powers have reached such a terrifying level? Mo Yunjue and the others quickly gave chase. However, they were already injured. On the other hand, Qian Feilong and the others were in peak condition. Hence, they could not catch up to them at all. After giving chase for some distance, Mo Yunjue and the others chose to give up and return to Ren Zimei's side. Ren Zimei hugged Ren Ziheng and was sobbing her eyes out. Ren Ziheng held Ren Zimei's hand and said, "Zimei, don't be sad. You must live on. I will watch over you from above with mother and father." Hearing this, Ren Zimei shook her head vehemently. "No, big brother, don't leave me alone." Just then, Chu Jinfeng spat out a mouthful of blood. His face was as white as a sheet. When she saw Chu Jinfeng's state, Ren Zimei could not help but look at him and ask, "Jinfeng, how are you?" Chu Jinfeng shook his head. "Zimei, don't be sad. Everyone will die sooner or later. We will wait for you in the underworld. You will meet someone who will treat you even better." As he spoke, a dim light flashed across Chu Jinfeng's eyes. He had once hoped that it would be him. He never thought that he would not be able to do so in the end. When he thought of leaving Ren Zimei alone in this world, he could not help but feel his heart ache. No. Ren Zimei finally couldn't control herself and burst into tears. "I don't want to live alone in this world. I don't want." The two most important people to her in this world were Ren Ziheng and Chu Jinfeng. However, today, the two most important people in her life were going to leave her together. How could she accept this? Shangguan Yingying hurried to Ren Zimei's side. At this moment, she felt as if Ren Zimei had fallen into darkness, and no light could save her. "Zimei, be strong," Shangguan Yingying said with concern. Ren Zimei shook her head. No matter how strong she usually pretended to be, in the face of this scene, how could she be strong? As long as Ren Ziheng could survive, she would rather not learn to be strong for the rest of her life. Seeing that Ren Zimei was completely immersed in grief, Shangguan Yingying's eyes were slightly red. She immediately took out a bottle of pills from her Qiankuan bag and fed it to Ren Ziheng without hesitation. "This was given to me by Hong Zhuang. She said it's a life-saving pill. Now that Hong Zhuang isn't here, I can only try using this pill." Chapter 4128. Ren Zimei had been completely immersed in grief and did not hear anything that Shangguan Yingying had said. However, when she saw Shangguan Yingying's actions, her eyes lit up a little, and a hint of hope appeared in her eyes. "Junior sister Shangguan, is this pill effective?" "Actually, I'm not too sure." Shangguan Yingying's expression showed some hesitation. "This was given to me by Hong Zhuang. She said it was for emergencies and to prevent us from being separated. However, I'm very confident in Hong Zhuang's pill refining skills. She's a high-level pill refiner and has mastered many incredible pill recipes. Since it was given by her, it must be a treasure. I hope it'll be effective." As she spoke, Shangguan Yingying's gaze fell upon Ren Ziheng and Chu Jinfeng. She could only hope that this pill would be effective. However, since Bailey Hongzhuang had given them this pill, they had not used it, so she could not be sure of the pill's specific effects. Ren Zimei nodded repeatedly. She seemed to be grasping at a life-saving straw. Her eyes were fixed on Ren Ziheng and Chu Jinfeng as she prayed in her heart. Now she could only hope for a miracle. She hoped that Bailey Hongzhuang's pill would really be effective. If Ren Ziheng and Chu Jinfeng could survive, she was willing to give her life to Bailey Hongzhuang and Shangguan Yingying. After Ren Ziheng and Chu Jinfeng had taken the pill, they felt a warm energy spread throughout their bodies. This energy was very gentle and nourished their bodies. Their bodies, which had been gradually losing their vitality, slowly recovered under the effects of this pill. The two of them could not help but feel astonished. Shangguan Yingying and Ren Zimei had been watching over Ren Ziheng and Chu Jinfeng until Mo Yunjue and the others returned. Shangguan Yingying then stood up and asked, "How was it?" Xiren shook his head. "They ran away. That damn Qian Feilong. Don't let me find the chance or I'll kill him." Ren Zimei's eyes were fierce and persistent. "I'll kill Qian Feilong with my own hands. Cut him into 1,000 pieces and tear him to pieces." "How are senior brother Ren and the others?" After when Xiren sized up Ren Ziheng and Shangguan Yingying, he then looked at Shangguan Yingying. Judging from the situation, although Qian Feilong had left them on the verge of death, they did not die immediately. Maybe there was still a glimmer of hope. Shangguan Yingying spread out her hands and said, "I fed them the life-saving pills that Hong Zhuang gave us, but I can't tell how effective they are." Hearing this, when Xiren nodded slightly and said, "Senior Ren, Hong Zhuang's medicine has always been very effective. Don't be too sad. Maybe there's still a chance." Ren Zimei nodded, but she was still somewhat absent-minded. Her hands were tightly clenched together. She was obviously nervous to the extreme. Just as they were conversing, Mo Yunjue suddenly groaned, and his face became abnormally ugly. Noticing the change in Mo Yunjue, Xiren's expression changed. He quickly helped Mo Yunjue to sit down and asked, "Yunjue, what's wrong?" Mo Yunjue waved his hand and took out a pill and swallowed it, saying, "I'm fine." Chapter 41-29. It's just that at that time, junior apprentice brother Mo forcefully endured all of this and didn't say anything. Ao Lingxiao's face was filled with guilt. Previously, he did not have a good impression of Mo Yunjue. He only felt that this fellow was too cold and unapproachable. However, he did not expect that Mo Yunjue would be injured in order to save him. It was only at that moment that he realized that Mo Yunjue was actually a person who was cold on the outside but warm on the inside. Hearing Ao Lingxiao's words, Xiren and Shangguan Yingying finally came to their senses. They did not notice that Mo Yunjue's injuries were so serious. Seeing that everyone was looking at him with concern, Mo Yunjue waved his hand and said, "It's a good thing that Qian Feilong did not see through it. Otherwise, if we really fought, the situation would be terrible." In fact, he was already at the end of his rope. He was only forcefully suppressing the situation in his body. He was originally certain that Qian Feilong would choose to leave after seeing them in such a state. If Qian Feilong did not do so, and instead fought them head-on, they would be finished. "Yunjue, so you've been forcefully holding on all this time." Shangguan Yingying's eyes flickered with a complicated light. "I'm really too stupid. I actually did not see through it all this time, and even let you chase Qian Feilong for so long. I deliberately did not tell you. That was the only way to fool Qian Feilong." Mo Yunjue's expression was heavy. "Although Qian Feilong has left, we are not safe now. In my opinion, we should leave as soon as possible, or find a place to hide. Otherwise, once their people gather and find trouble with us, none of us will be able to escape." He knew very well that the two Starlight cultivators from before were not simple. As a cultivator from such a sect, almost none of them were simple. Although he had defeated them, he had also paid a huge price. However, he did not like to show his weak side in front of everyone. If he did not find a place to rest properly, he was afraid that he would not be able to hold on any longer. Hearing Mo Yunjue's words, everyone came to their senses. Xiren and Shangguan Yingying couldn't help but look at each other. They couldn't help but think that once Qian Feilong returned and communicated with Mu Zhe and the others, the matter of Mu Zhe letting them go would probably be exposed. At that time, once they came together, the situation would be extremely terrible. "Carry senior brother Ren and senior brother Chu. Let's leave quickly," Xiren hurriedly said. "What about Beichen and Hong Zhuang? Will they be in danger?" Shangguan Yingying's eyes were filled with worry. Although the people from the Crimson Moon sect were chasing after them, she also understood that the people Li Boyo wanted to kill the most were Di Beichen and Bailey Hong Zhuang. Hearing this, Mo Yunjue could not help but frown. Under such circumstances, Hong Zhuang is in great danger. No one knew when exactly Hong Zhuang would come out. It would be fine if she stayed in there for a long time. However, if she stayed in there for a short time, wouldn't she run into Li Boyo and the others as soon as she came out? If she really fell into such a situation, it would be impossible for her to keep her life. Everyone looked at each other, looking unusually troubled. Chapter 4130. When Xiren's eyes flashed with a thoughtful light. Their team was now either injured or crippled. They could not be of any help at all. Moreover, there was no shelter in this training ground. Once the other party caught up to them, they would not be able to find a place to hide. Ao Lingxiao nodded. Indeed, with our current state, we really can't be of any help. Everyone sighed. If they went back now, they would not be of any use other than sending themselves to their deaths. They might even drag down Bewitching and Bailey Hongzhuang. Rather than that, they might as well go back and heal their injuries first. It would be best if they could get the cultivators from Penglai Palace to come and help. That would be the best solution. If it were any other day, it would be a little troublesome to get the cultivators from Penglai Palace to come and help. However, this time, it had escalated to the level of trouble between Penglai Palace and the Crimson Moon sect. They believed that the cultivators from Penglai Palace would definitely do their best to help. Mo Yunjue frowned. He could not bear the thought that Bailey Hongzhuang might be in danger. However, looking at his trembling hands, he really did not have any strength left. Yunjue, don't worry. Hongzhuang has the ability to protect herself. Trust me, I won't lie to you. Xiren stared at Mo Yunjue. He understood how important Bailey Hongzhuang was to Mo Yunjue. If he could not guarantee Bailey Hongzhuang's safety, Mo Yunjue would not be able to leave with peace of mind. The reason why he was not too worried was because he knew that Bailey Hongzhuang had the Chaos Ring. If she was being hunted down, as long as there was a chance, Bailey Hongzhuang could escape into the Chaos Ring. As a result, it would be impossible for Li Boyo and the others to find her. Mo Yunjue was originally unwilling to leave, but after seeing how confident Wen Xiren was, he nodded hesitantly. Based on his understanding of Wen Xiren, the latter had always been very concerned about Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching. Since he was so sure, he must have his reasons. Although he didn't know what it was, he believed that it couldn't be wrong. After making the decision, everyone rushed in the direction of Penglai Palace. They had to hurry. When Qian Feilong and the other two saw that Mo Yunjue and the rest did not chase after them, they finally relaxed. Immediately, they heaved a deep sigh of relief. I didn't expect these guys to still be alive. What's going on? Qian Feilong's face was filled with confusion. He just couldn't understand. In my opinion, something must have happened. We should hurry back and take a look. Hearing this, Qian Feilong nodded. Now they had to hurry back to understand the ins and outs of this matter. After seeing that everyone had gone after Run Ziheng and the others, Li Boyo had been waiting outside the ruins for them to return. In fact, he didn't dare to stay in the ruins, because he didn't know where Bailey Hongzhuang was. If Bailey Hongzhuang suddenly appeared, he, who had his Dantian destroyed, was no match for her. Although he was now a cripple, he still didn't want to die like this. At least, it was good to be alive. While waiting, he finally saw Muze and the other two slowly walking back. A trace of joy immediately appeared on his face. Muze, you're back. How is it? Chapter 4131. After hearing Muze's answer, Li Boyo's face suddenly revealed a joyful smile. Although they had not found Bailey Hongzhuang's whereabouts yet, as long as Bailey Hongzhuang knew that everyone else was dead, it would definitely be a great blow to her. Even if they could not find Bailey Hongzhuang, it would be good to make Bailey Hongzhuang feel extreme pain. The most depressing thing was that he could not kill either Bailey Hongzhuang or Bewitching. As long as one of them died, the other would definitely be in so much pain that he would rather die. Just like how he was now a cripple. This was the situation he wanted to see the most. Muze, thank you. Li Boyo said gratefully. Facing Li Boyo's grateful gaze, Muze did not feel guilty at all. In this situation, he was still willing to deceive Li Boyo. This was already very polite to him. Eldest senior brother. Are we the only ones who came back? The other teammates didn't come back? Muze looked around, and after discovering that there were no other cultivators besides them, he could not help but frown. Li Buoyo nodded slightly. I've been waiting here for you to come back. Other than you, the others did not come back. Then their speed is really slow, another person said with a smile, feeling a little guilty in his heart. They did not attack Xiren and Bewitching at all. It was because of this that they were the fastest. Eldest senior brother, you've been here for so long. Did you see Bailey Hongzhuang? No. Li Buoyo frowned. There was no movement at all. I really don't understand where Bailey Hongzhuang went. By the way, when you were fighting with Xiren and Bewitching, did you ask about Bailey Hongzhuang's whereabouts? Hearing Li Buoyo's question, the other two cultivators couldn't help but look at Muze. Previously, they were only thinking about how to obtain more benefits from Xiren and Wuxia. They had long forgotten about Bailey Hongzhuang's whereabouts. So why would they even think of asking? Muze, on the other hand, was very calm. I asked them, but they were very tight-lipped. No matter how I asked, they refused to tell me. In the end, I could only kill them. So that's how it is. Li Buoyo did not suspect anything. I didn't expect these guys to be so loyal. Let's wait for the others to come back, and ask them if they have found the whereabouts of Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. All right. After waiting for a while, Qian Feilong and the others slowly appeared in front of Li Buoyo and the others. When they noticed that Qian Feilong and the others had returned, one of the cultivator's legs was injured and had to be carried back directly. As for the other cultivator, he was nowhere to be seen. Everyone could not help but reveal a trace of shock on their faces. Junior brother Qian, what happened to you? Li Buoyo could not hide the shock on his face. According to his judgment, Run Zihang and the others were not very strong. Qian Feilong and the others should have no problem chasing after them. How could someone be injured now? We were tricked. Qian Feilong sighed, his face full of bad luck. I didn't expect those three guys to have a trump card. They caught us off guard. Junior brother Li has fallen. How could this be? Chapter 4132. For a moment Li Buoyo felt a little guilty. After all, Qian Feilong only helped because of their past relationship. Junior brother Li actually lost his life because of this. How could he not feel guilty? These guys don't seem to have much ability, but they can't be underestimated. If we're not careful, we'll fail miserably. Qian Feilong sighed and shook his head. Recalling the previous scenes, he still felt that it was a loss. It was originally a problem that could be solved completely, but it kept on causing trouble. Now, not only were they unable to solve these problems, they even had to run back. It was really embarrassing. Senior brother Qian, did you kill them all? Muze asked. Qian Feilong shook his head. Ren Zihang and Chu Jinfeng should have been killed by me, but Ren Zimei is still alive. Why? Li Buoyo's face was full of confusion. Obviously, he couldn't understand why Qian Feilong would choose to leave one person behind in such a situation. Wasn't this leaving trouble? Their helpers are here. Penglai Palace's people are here? Wan Yinling and the others? Li Buoyo quickly asked. If Wan Yinling and the others were here, then this matter would be a little troublesome. No. Qian Feilong's gaze then turned to Muze. Speaking of which, I don't understand. Muze, didn't you chase after Xiren and Chu Jinfeng? Why didn't you succeed? Instead, you gave them the chance to rescue Ren Zihang and the others? Following Qian Feilong's words, Muze was stunned. Li Buoyo was also stunned. What did you say? Li Buoyo said in a daze. You said that Xiren and Chu Jinfeng are still alive. Qian Feilong nodded. Not only are they still alive, Mo Yunjue and Chu Jinfeng are also still alive. I thought that they wouldn't appear. Who would have thought that they would appear together to save Ren Zihang and the others? The other side had more people, so we came back and only killed Ren Zihang and Chu Jinfeng. Ren Zimei didn't have time to do anything. Li Buoyo's gaze couldn't help but turn to Muze. The gratitude in his eyes suddenly changed a little, and his expression became very complicated. Muze, didn't you say that Wen and Xiren had already died in your hands? What? Qian Feilong was surprised as he looked at Muze in astonishment. obviously not having expected such a situation. Instantly, Mu Zhe and the two cultivators behind him fell into silence. They did not expect that Xiren and Wen Leong would actually run over to help others after leaving. This was truly beyond their expectations. According to their thinking, it was already not easy for Wen Xiren and his companion to escape with their lives in such a situation. Why would they run to their deaths? However, these two people just didn't play by the rules, so their situation was discovered by others. It was really depressing. However, in the current situation, with Qian Feilong confronting them, no matter how they tried to cover up their lies, it would be impossible for them to succeed. Thus, they decided to remain silent. When Li Boyo saw Mu Zhe and the others fall into silence, he already understood. There was no need to explain, because it was already very obvious. They were the ones who had let Wen Xiren escape. Chapter 4133. Qian Feilong frowned and looked at Mu Zhe in confusion. Why would you do that? Mu Zhe remained silent. Now that the matter had been completely exposed, there was no way to explain, so he was too lazy to explain. Looking at Mu Zhe's appearance, Qian Feilong could not help but sigh. Sigh. According to this explanation, only 2 of Ren Ziheng's group of 7 died, and the rest were completely let go. I know that with my current appearance, I'm no longer of any use. Li Boyo could not help but feel disappointed. He had already expected this to happen in the future, but he did not expect that the person he had always treated as a brother would not even care about this little bit of friendship. Seeing this, Mu Zhe's expression became complicated. Eldest senior brother, I've really let you down in this matter. You wanted to kill Bailey Hongzhuang, so I'll accompany you in this ruin to find Bailey Hongzhuang. What do you think? Originally, he still hoped that Bailey Hongzhuang could return alive, because only then would he be able to obtain enough spirit stones. However, Xiren and Shangguan Yingying obviously did not abide by their agreement, so he did not intend to continue to abide by it. It would be fine if he was not discovered, but now that he was, he naturally still wanted to save face. Otherwise, it would be difficult for him to get along with Qian Feilong and the rest in the future. Mu Zhe, I won't force you. Li Boyo waved his hand, looking completely disheartened. I'm not forcing you. I'm willing to do this. Mu Zhe said solemnly. Qian Feilong looked at Mu Zhe and understood that Mu Zhe was sincere. He immediately said, This time you can't cause any trouble. Eldest senior brother has helped us a lot. This is his last wish. We can't let him down. Hearing this, Mu Zhe nodded. Okay. There are a few other guys. When they come back, I'll have to talk to them. Qian Feilong said helplessly. Li Boyo and the rest immediately waited outside the ruin. However, they waited for a long time, and did not wait for the few cultivators to return. They could not help but look at each other, and a bad feeling arose in their minds. They haven't returned after such a long time. Could something have happened to them? Qian Feilong asked doubtfully. Mu Zhe frowned. With their cultivation, logically speaking, there shouldn't be any danger. Let's go take a look. It's strange that nothing has happened for so long. Li Boyo could not help but say. Even if they let Mo Yunjue and Ao Lingxiao go, it was impossible for them not to come back. At the very least, they would make up a lie like Mu Zhe. As long as no one exposed it, no one would know. In the next moment, Li Boyo and the others immediately set off to search. Bailey Hongzhuang was still studying this restriction. According to her understanding, this restriction required a powerful cultivation to break it. With her current cultivation, she was clearly not qualified, so there was no point in using force. Only by outsmarting her would there be a chance. Bai Long originally did not have any hope for Bailey Hongzhuang, but after seeing Bailey Hongzhuang's perseverance in her research, his expression could not help but change a little. Hey human, you've been studying for so long. Have you made any progress? Chapter 4134. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, the white dragon could not help but sigh. I saw that you've been concentrating on your research for so long, and I thought that you would have discovered something. It seems that my judgment was right, you can't do it. Even though the white dragon had denied everything, Bailey Hongzhuang did not seem to mind at all. Her delicate, jade-like face rippled with a faint, gentle smile. You're so powerful, but haven't you also been trapped here for so many years? I've only been researching for a short while. Isn't it normal that I haven't discovered anything? The white dragon could not help but be shaken. It had wanted to mock Bailey Hongzhuang, but it was suddenly unable to say anything. Indeed, it had been researching here for so many years and had not succeeded. What right did it have to criticize Bailey Hongzhuang? The three beasties watched as the white dragon was rendered speechless by Bailey Hongzhuang's words, and could not help but chuckle. Master was indeed master. She usually did not speak, but when she did, she could shut the other party up. I can't be bothered with you. The white dragon pursed its lips. Then you can slowly research here. If you can really break this seal, I'll acknowledge you as my master. Why do I remember you saying that whoever can take you away would be your master? If I can take you away, I'm already your master. Why would I need you to acknowledge me as your master? Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes flashed with a sly light. She had also discovered that although this white dragon had a tough appearance, it was actually very naive and easy to coax. She could tell that from the few words it had exchanged. The white dragon was dumbfounded, and its brain could not wrap itself around the situation. It had clearly felt that what it had said was quite reasonable, but why did it feel that it was in the wrong after hearing what Bailey Hongzhuang had said? Sigh. White dragon, my master is right. What you've said is nothing. Xiaohe quickly spoke up. All right. The white dragon, who had transformed into a woman, puffed up her cheeks and said gloomily, if you can break this seal, I'll acknowledge you as the #1 most powerful, most intelligent, and most capable master in the world. Is this okay? Bailey Hongzhuang's lips curled into a sly smile. It's a deal. It's a deal. Then, Bailey Hongzhuang began to concentrate on studying the restriction. Seeing this, Xiaobai couldn't help but jump to Bailey Hongzhuang's side and ask curiously, Master, do you have an idea? Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. Actually, this restriction is a spirit array set up by an expert. As long as you can break this spirit array, you can break this restriction. However, this restriction is very powerful, and the spirit array is not simple either. Breaking it is not an easy task. I believe Master can do it. Xiaobai's eyes shone with a determined light. In its eyes, its master was the most powerful existence. You have that much confidence in me? Bailey Hongzhuang stroked Xiaobai's head. She had to admit that these two little fur balls felt extraordinarily good to touch. Of course, when Li Boyo and the others saw the corpses on the ground, their faces instantly turned extremely ugly. How could this be? Li Boyo stared blankly at the 4 corpses on the ground. 2 of them were Starlight Realm experts. He never thought that they would die here. Chapter 4135. It's impossible for Mo Yunjie and his companions' battle powers to be so powerful. They could actually kill all 4 of them. Qian Feilong's eyes flashed with disbelief. This doesn't make sense at all. They already knew that Mo Yunjie and his companions' powers were rather powerful, so they did not dare to overlook them, and had sent out an even more powerful team to kill them. Who would have thought that they would all die at the hands of Mo Yunjie and his companion? This was far too terrifying. But, aside from this explanation, we can't find any other explanation. Mu Zhe slowly said. Even though he did not want to believe everything that had happened before his eyes, it was all true. Even if they did not want to believe it, it was useless. Bailey Hongzhuang. Li Boyo's eyes flashed with a furious light. He had never expected that they would pay such a heavy price this time. Qian Feilong and the others' eyes flashed with a vicious light. These were all their brothers, and they had always fought side by side. However, they had now died at the hands of those from Penglai Palace. This was simply too abominable. Damn it! We must kill Bailey Hongzhuang and avenge everyone. Everyone nodded. If they had previously thought that Bailey Hongzhuang and her companions did not hold much of a grudge against them, they no longer thought that way. Now there was a great hatred between them. Their team had almost been disbanded because of the cultivators from Penglai Palace. Who could accept this situation? After making such a decision, they buried their fallen brothers before returning to the ruins. They believed that Bailey Hongzhuang would never have been the first to leave, so she must still be in the ruins. However, they had overlooked her and failed to find her. Initially, they had wanted to chase after Run Zime and the others. However, so much time had passed, and they did not know where they had escaped to. This training ground was not small. If they did not know the direction in which they had escaped, it would be very difficult to find them. If Bailey Hongzhuang were to escape because of this, that would be the worst thing that could happen. Therefore, they decided to guard the ruins. Even if they couldn't wait until Bailey Hongzhuang came out, they could wait until Bewitching came out. As long as someone appeared, that would be enough. When Xiren and the others had been hurrying along, not daring to stop for even a moment, none of them knew if the other party would catch up to them. Even though they were all heavily injured, they could only grit their teeth and leave under such circumstances. On one hand, they were worried about their own safety. On the other hand, they wanted to go back and find help as soon as possible. As long as they had help, Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching would not be in danger. When Xiren carried Ren Ziheng on his back while Ao Lingxiao carried Chu Jinfeng on his back. Originally, the two of them were in a terrible state. However, after taking the pills, they discovered that although their complexions were still not good, they did not show any signs of dying. Just this discovery alone was enough to make Ren Zime go wild with joy. Her greatest wish now was for Ren Ziheng and Chu Jinfeng to survive. Other than that, she had no other wishes in her life. Chapter 4136. Bailey Hongzhuang was fully immersed in studying the restriction. She had a certain amount of research on formations, but this kind of formation was very complicated, and it was extremely difficult to break it. Fortunately, it was still early. She believed that Bewitching still needed some time to accept the inheritance, so she was not in a hurry. No matter what, this was a new challenge for her. Xiren and the others rushed back to Penglai Palace. However, the place where they were before was the center of the training ground, so it was not possible to rush back in a short time. Moreover, the skeleton army would appear at any time during the night, so everyone had to be very careful. In their current state, if they encountered the skeleton army, it would be really terrible. Mo Yunjue, Ren Ziheng, and Chu Jinfeng's injuries were very serious. Originally, in such a situation, they needed to recuperate, but there was no chance for them to recuperate because of their blindness. Therefore, in such a situation, it was already very good that the three of them could ensure that their injuries did not become serious. It was impossible for them to recover. Damn it, why is this training ground so big? When we came here, we didn't think it would take so long. Shangguan Yingying frowned. Her face was full of depression. At that time, we were in our best condition, so our speed was naturally faster. Now that everyone is injured, of course, we can't be fast. Xiren sighed. Facing such a situation, he was also very helpless. If there was a way, he also hoped to be able to return as soon as possible. Don't be impatient. It's useless to be anxious now. As long as we can return safely, it's already very good. Ao Lingxiao's expression was also full of helplessness. In his heart, he was praying that Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching would be fine. On one hand, it was because of the friendship between them. On the other hand, it was also because he pinned all his hopes of taking back his family on Bewitching. If something happened to Bewitching and Bailey Hongzhuang, then his hope would naturally be impossible. Although this was only a prophecy, and many people would find it ridiculous if he said it out loud, he still believed in this prophecy. He believed that there would be a day when he would take back his family. After a lot of hard work, Xiren and the others finally arrived at the location of the teleportation array. When everyone saw the teleportation array, they couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. They could finally go back. When Xiren and the others had already decided that the first thing they would do when they returned was to look for Master Long. With how much Master Long valued Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching, he would definitely think of a way to support them as soon as he found out about this matter. Moreover, Master Long and the others were relatively stronger, so they were naturally the fastest to rush over. Just the fact that Bewitching was able to obtain the inheritance of the Dark Force meant that his value was extraordinary. Since knowing that Di Baichen had participated in the training, Di Yujue had been paying attention to the movements in Penglai Palace. He had been waiting to meet Di Baichen for too many years. Now that Di Baichen was not far from him, he was naturally looking forward to it. When he learned that this training was over, he immediately rushed to Penglai Palace to find Di Baichen. However, he did not expect to be told that Di Baichen had not returned yet. Chapter 4137. Although he also had some complicated views on the inheritance of the dark power, he also understood that the power itself did not have any attributes. What happened back then made them have to admit that the dark power was extremely powerful. If he could obtain the inheritance of the dark power, Di Baichen's future would be limitless. He also admired Di Baichen more in his heart. There were many outstanding cultivators in the three major forces, but Di Baichen was able to stand out from so many cultivators and obtain the inheritance of the ruins. His ability was not simple. Now he was only waiting for Di Baichen to return. When he thought of the scene of them reuniting, he could not help but feel a little excited. After when Xiren and the others arrived at Penglai Palace, the cultivators in the palace looked at their seriously injured appearance with surprise in their eyes. When senior brother Wanyan came back, didn't he say that Di Baichen obtained the inheritance of the dark power? And when Xiren and the others did not suffer any harm, why are they like this when they come back now? A cultivator looked at when Xiren and the others in a daze. They looked like they were seriously injured. Could it be that something happened after senior brother Wanyan and the others came back? I don't know. Senior brother Wanyan said it himself. It should be impossible for there to be any changes. Now only they have come back. Di Baichen and Bailey Hongzhuang have not come back yet. Looking at the situation, I am afraid that something terrible has happened. Faced with everyone's guesses, Xiren and the others did not care about anything else. They rushed to Long Yanwei's residence immediately. When they arrived at Long Yanwei's residence, fortunately, Long Yanwei was also there. Looking at Mo Yunjue and the others who were seriously injured in front of him, Long Yanwei suddenly turned pale with fright. What happened to you? Who hurt you? Ever since he learned that Di Baichen had obtained the legacy of darkness, he had been waiting here at ease. In particular, he had completely relaxed after learning about the situation of Di Baichen's group from Wanyan Ling. He did not expect Di Baichen to be so powerful. All the cultivators from the three major forces had gone, but they, the newcomers, were able to obtain the inheritance. This time, it really shocked everyone. However, according to what Wanyan Ling said, Di Baichen and the others should be very safe. However, judging from the miserable state of Xiren and the others, it was obvious that they had gone through an earth-shattering battle and had only managed to survive after expending a tremendous amount of effort. They are cultivators from the Crimson Moon sect, when Xiren said in a deep voice. The expression in Long Yanwei's eyes changed a little when he heard this. However, he did not immediately inquire about this matter in detail. Instead, he looked towards the injured Mo Yunjue and the rest. Judging by the situation, your injuries are very serious. You should quickly go and rest. Long Yanwei's face was filled with concern. He then turned to look at Xiren. When Xiren, if your condition is good, you can stay here and explain this matter to me in detail. After speaking, Long Yanwei quickly called for people to send Mo Yunjue and the others back to their residence. He also ordered people to find a doctor and an alchemist to treat them. In the end, only Xiren and Shengguan Yingying remained. Chapter 4138. We were attacked by the Crimson Moon sect cultivators. When Xiren's expression was gloomy, the cultivators in their group are more powerful, and they have more people than us. We are at a complete disadvantage. Previously, when they came out to kill us, we used all our skills and finally managed to escape. However, everyone was injured. Ren Ziheng and Chu Jinfeng almost lost their lives. Until now, we don't know if they will survive. Hearing Xiren's words, Yizihua could not help but frown. Are the Crimson Moon sect cultivators you're talking about Li Buoyo and the rest? Shengguan Yingying nodded. That's right, it's them. I heard from Wanyan Ling that they came back with ease after seeing Li Buoyo and the rest leave. Could it be that they came back again? Yes, they suddenly came back after leaving for a day. None of us expected this. After receiving Xiren's confirmation, Long Yanwei and Yizihua's expressions turned ugly. They never thought that Li Buoyo would do such a thing. It was obvious that he had done it on purpose to deceive Wang Yinling and the rest. As such, as long as Wang Yinling and the rest left, Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest would not be a match for them. This Li Buoyo is really despicable. Yizihua's eyes darkened. His dantian has been destroyed, but he still managed to stir up so much trouble. How despicable! Bang! Long Yanwei slammed the table, and his face was filled with rage. Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest were the young people in the Penglai Palace who were currently in the limelight. According to their judgment, they would replace Wang Yinling and the rest in the future. Now, Li Buoyo wanted to kill Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest in one fell swoop. This was too despicable. Lord Long, this is not the most important thing now. You should go and help Hongzhuang and Beichen, Shangguan Yingying hurriedly said. They are still in the ruins. According to our judgment, Li Buoyo and the others will definitely not give up. Maybe they will stay near the ruins and wait for Beichen and Hongzhuang to come out. After all, they have the advantage in numbers. Once they meet, Beichen and Hongzhuang will be in danger. The moment these words were spoken, Long Yanwei and Yizihua's expressions changed once again. According to you, Di Beichen and Bailey Hongzhuang have already encountered them? Xiren shook his head. We can't be sure about that. We don't know when Hongzhuang and Beichen will come out of the ruins, but the only thing we can be sure of is that Li Buoyo and the others will not let them go. Send someone to help immediately, Long Yanwei said to Yizihua without hesitation. If you encounter any cultivators from the Crimson Moon sect, kill them without mercy. Yizihua nodded when he saw the determination and ruthlessness in Long Yanwei's eyes. Don't worry. I'll make the arrangements immediately. No matter what, we can't let anything happen to Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen. Long Yanwei's heart sank. On one hand, Di Beichen and Bailey Hongzhuang were cultivators that he had high hopes for. He had always treated them as his most valued disciples. Now that they were in danger and had been schemed against by the cultivators from the Crimson Moon sect, how could he not help them immediately? Chapter 4139. Yizihua was naturally aware of this. With Di Beichen's current status, he was practically the crown prince of Penglai Palace. Anyone could have an accident, but Di Beichen absolutely could not have an accident. If anything were to happen to him, even the Crimson Moon sect's sect leader would want nothing more than to personally kill the few fellows from his sect, let alone them. The consequences of angering the Di family was not something they could bear. Yanwei, in my opinion, we should inform the Golden Flame auction house about this matter, Yizihua said. Di Yujue had been waiting for Di Beichen's return. They had promised Di Yujue that they would inform Di Beichen as soon as he returned. Although the current situation was completely different from what they had expected, they had to give Di Yujue an explanation no matter what. At the very least, they had to let him know about this matter. Long Yanwei nodded his head when he heard this. They definitely could not hide this news. When Xiren and Shangguan Yingying heard that Yizihua was going to inform the Golden Flame auction house about this matter, they could not help but feel puzzled. They did not know what this matter had to do with the Golden Flame auction house. However, just as they were about to ask, the sound of footsteps was suddenly heard from outside the house. Immediately after, an outstanding figure appeared in their line of sight. Seeing this figure, Xiren and Shangguan Yingying could not help but be stunned. This was because they were no stranger to this figure. They had seen him before, but they did not expect to see him again here. However, after the other party arrived, he did not pay attention to them. Instead, he spoke directly to Long Yanwei. Long Yanwei, I heard that Beichen's situation is not good? Di Yujue's gaze was deep, and there was a haze in the depths of his eyes. When he heard the news, he immediately rushed over. Originally, he had been waiting for Di Beichen's good news. He did not expect to hear such bad news in the end. Naturally, he was in a terrible mood. Seeing that Di Yujue had actually come directly, Long Yanwei and Yizihua could not help but feel surprised. However, After thinking about it for a while, they understood. With Di Yujua's methods, he must have already planted spies in the Punglai Palace. Xiren and the others' return had attracted so much attention. Naturally, the other party had immediately reported the news to Di Yujua. Long Yanwei quickly stood up, with a respectful expression on his face. Di Baichen and Bailey Hongzhuang's situation is indeed not good. What's the reason? Di Yujua frowned and directly asked for the reason. The Crimson Moon sect's disciples have surrounded them with the intention of killing them. Long Yanwei explained concisely. Hearing this, Di Yujua laughed coldly. The Crimson Moon sect's members are getting bolder and bolder. They actually dared to attack Baichen. I think they're tired of living. Xiren and Shangguan Yingying, who were standing aside, could not help but look at each other when they saw this scene. Their minds were filled with questions. What's going on? Even though Di Yujua and Di Baichen had indeed become close friends, Di Yujua's sudden concern was still a little strange. Furthermore, Di Yujua's tone was a little too frightening, wasn't it? He actually said that the Crimson Moon sect was tired of living? Does he not know what kind of colossus the Crimson Moon sect was? Chapter 4140. Just as Shangguan Yingying and Wen Xiren were thinking about how Lord Long and Yi Zihua would warn Di Yujua after hearing this, they saw that the two of them did not dare to make a sound. It was as if Di Yujua was the boss. Shangguan Yingying and Wen Zihua were dumbfounded when they saw this. What was going on? Could it be that Di Yujua's background is so powerful? He was not even afraid of the sect master of the Crimson Moon sect. Long Yanwei and Wen Zihua could not care less about what Shangguan Yingying and Wen Zihua were thinking. Their hearts were filled with worry and helplessness was written all over their faces. None of us had expected this to happen, so we planned to save them immediately, Long Yanwei quickly explained. They would rather offend the entire Crimson Moon sect than offend Di Yujua. Furthermore, the cultivators of the Crimson Moon sect had attacked Di Baichen, and this had undoubtedly angered Di Yujua. Now the sect master of the Crimson Moon sect should be thinking about how to appease Di Yujua's anger. Now they could only hope that Di Baichen and Bailey Hongzhuang were alright. If anything were to happen to them, the Crimson Moon sect would be in for a bad time. Di Yujua's eyes were filled with haze. I'll bring some men over personally. I'd like to see who would dare to attack Baichen. His deep, magnetic voice was filled with anger and murderous intent. He had finally found his son after much difficulty. If anything were to happen to Di Baichen, he would make those fellows wish they were dead. Hearing this, Long Yanwei and Yi Zihua did not dare to refute him. They nodded and said, all right. Shangguan Yingying and Wen Xiren looked at each other. Their minds had turned into mush. They even suspected that they had been too tired over the past 2 days to the point that they were hallucinating. Everything that was happening before their eyes was inexplicable. What on earth is going on? Wen Xiren was dumbfounded. Why was Di Yujua so concerned about Di Baichen after not seeing him for a while? I don't know. Shangguan Yingying shook her head. Everything that had happened in front of her was clearly inexplicable. She couldn't figure it out. Di Yujua immediately planned to set off to the training grounds. Xiren and Wen Xinya were also traveling together. Seeing this, Xiren and Wen Xinya hurriedly caught up and said, I'll go with you. Yi Zihua looked at the fatigued Wen Xiren duo and could not help but say, you two have been very tired these past few days. In addition, you are injured. You should rest well here. However, Xiren shook his head firmly. No, I want to go with you. If we don't see Baichen and Hongzhuang return safely, we won't be able to rest in peace, Shangguan Yingying said. If it weren't for the fact that they had no other choice, they would have liked to stay there. Unfortunately, under those circumstances, they simply did not have the strength to help Di Baichen and Wen Xinya. Now that they had found helpers, they could completely deal with Li Buoyo and the others. Even if the two of them were not in good condition, there would not be any problems. Listening to the two's words, Di Yujua's gaze could not help but fall on Xiren and Wen Xinya. He was no stranger to these two. When he first met Di Baichen, these two were also by Di Baichen's side. Originally, he did not pay much attention to these two, because all his attention was on Di Baichen and Bailey Hongzhuang's safety. Chapter 41-41. It seemed that these two people were indeed Bewitching's best friends. Otherwise, they wouldn't have insisted on going with them at this point, because they were worried about the safety of Bewitching and Shang Guaning. Everyone's speed was extremely fast, and they entered the teleportation array without hesitation. Long Yanwei and Yi Zihua originally wanted to send other cultivators, but now that even Di Yujue had gone, they naturally didn't need to send anyone else. During the journey, Xiren couldn't help but look at Di Yujue and ask, "Young Master Di, we meet again." Hearing this, Di Yujue turned his head to look at Xiren and nodded with a gentle expression. That's right. Facing his son's best friend, he naturally admired him very much. "May I know when young Master Di came back? Why are you so concerned about Bewitching?" Xiren was full of doubts. This Di Yujue's behavior was really too strange. This kind of kindness and concern had completely exceeded the scope of ordinary friends. Although according to their understanding, Bewitching seemed to treat Di Yujue as a confidant. But suddenly being so close to him still made people feel that something was wrong. Yi Zihua looked at Xiren's puzzled look and couldn't help but laugh. "When Xiren, you still don't know, right? This young Master Di is Bewitching's father." Following Yi Zihua's words, Xiren and Shangguan Yingying couldn't help but be startled. Then, their eyes widened and flashed with a thick sense of astonishment. They only suspected that they had heard wrongly. "Teacher Yi, what did you just say?" Xiren stared at Yi Zihua, obviously unable to digest the news he had just heard. He had always guided Bewitching to search for his biological father, but he had never thought that Di Yujue would actually be Bewitching's father. Wasn't this too unbelievable? I said, "Young Master Di is Bewitching's father." Shangguan Yingying and Xiren both fell into silence. When they looked at Di Yujue again, their eyes were filled with suspicion. Although Di Yujue in front of them looked handsome and had an extraordinary temperament, and was obviously not an ordinary person, this person suddenly said that he was Bewitching's father. No matter what, it was unbelievable. Bewitching still didn't know who his father was. So how did he know that Bewitching was his son? Although Bewitching has never known who his biological father is, but how do you know that Bewitching is your son? Xiren looked at Di Yujue with a cautious expression. Thinking back, when Bewitching had just arrived at Penglai Island, Di Yujue hadn't confirmed this. Now that Bewitching had made a name for himself, Di Yujue had to be cautious about this matter no matter what. Looking at Xiren's cautious and suspicious expression, Di Yujue couldn't help but chuckle. "You think I'm lying to you?" Seeing Di Yujue directly say his thoughts, Xiren was a little embarrassed, but he still said, "After all, none of us know whether this matter is true or not. You should be the young master of the Cloud Sword sect," Di Yujue said with a faint smile. Following Di Yujue's words, Xiren couldn't help but be stunned. "How do you know?" Chapter 41-42. I've been to Tiangang sect, and sect master Sita told me. He told me that the young master of Cloud Sword sect and Bewitching grew up together and had a good relationship. When he knew that Bewitching was in danger and wanted to come to Penglai Island to find good medicine, he accompanied him. Now that I think about it, there is no other candidate except you. You've been to Tiangang sect. When Xiren was slightly taken aback. If it was said that he was extremely suspicious of Di Yujue's identity before, at this moment, when he heard Di Yujue mention the Heavenly Dipper sect, he suddenly believed a lot more. Di Yujue nodded slightly. To be honest, when I left Penglai Island before, I found the news about my son's whereabouts. So I set off to the outside world and found Tiangang sect all the way. I just didn't expect that I had already seen Bewitching, but I didn't recognize him. It's really helpless. Then you confirmed Bewitching's identity after you went to Tiangang sect? Xiren's gaze gradually changed, and he couldn't help but look at Di Yujue in front of him again. Since childhood, he and Bewitching had discussed the issue of his life for a long time. He had always wondered why Bewitching's parents would abandon him. Bewitching was obviously very good-looking and had no problems. Logically speaking, it shouldn't be like this. That's right. Di Yujue nodded. Over the years, I've been looking for Bewitching's whereabouts. I've been to many places, but I didn't get the right news. Until I went to Tiangang sect this time, I was sure that Beichen was my son. Then how can you prove the relationship between you and Beichen? Shangguan Yingying couldn't help but ask. She had always been wary of people who appeared inexplicably. In the past, she might not have been so cautious about everything. However, ever since she came to Penglai Island, she realized that the people here were too good at hiding and deceiving. If she was not careful, she might be deceived by the other party. Now, Beichen was good at everything, and he had also obtained the inheritance of the power of darkness. Needless to say, his future was limitless. This was not something that could be casually claimed to be his father. When Long Yanwei and Yizihua saw Wen Xiren, and Yizihua cautiously guarding against Di Yujue, and worried that Di Yujue would take advantage of Di Beichen, their gazes became unusually helpless. With Di Yujue's status, who knew how many people would cry and shout to be his son? However, now that Di Yujue was beside them, the two of them couldn't say anything. However, Di Yujue looked at Wen Xiren and Yizihua's expressions, and felt that it was very interesting. Although the two of them didn't say anything, it could be seen from their performance that they were sincere about Beichen. The suspicion and fear on their faces were obviously because they were worried about Di Beichen. He was also happy for Di Beichen. Do you think this is okay? Suddenly, a jade pendant appeared in Di Yujue's hand. He believed that as Di Beichen's best friends, Xiren and Yizihua would be able to recognize it. Sure enough, when he took out the jade pendant, Xiren and Shangguan Yingying's expressions changed. Their eyes flashed with a strong sense of astonishment. Huh, Shangguan Yingying said in surprise. Isn't this jade pendant exactly the same as the one Beichen has been wearing? How do you have it? Chapter 41-43. When Xiren looked at the jade pendant in Di Yujue's hand, he was already convinced of Di Yujue's words. In fact, he also knew in his heart that Di Yujue was definitely not an ordinary person. There was no need to lie to him at all. However, he still wanted to confirm for Di Beichen. Since Di Yujue could take out this token, all of this must be true. He definitely wouldn't lie to them. Xiren, could this person really be Beichen's father? Shangguan Yingying whispered. Xiren nodded slightly. It seems to be true. I didn't think so before, but now that you mention it, I feel that Beichen and him do look a little alike. You're right. Beichen is so handsome. If an ordinary person came and said that he was Beichen's father, I wouldn't believe it at all. However, this young Master D is also very handsome. I think it's true. That's right. Do you remember when Beichen first saw him, he acted very strangely? Usually, with Beichen's character, he wouldn't take the initiative to get close to other cultivators. However, this young Master D seemed like an old friend at first sight. Now that I think about it, this should be kinship. Now that he thought about all of this, Xiren could understand. From Di Beichen's different attitude towards Di Yujue, to the inexplicable way in which the two of them became close friends. In fact, it was because of their blood relationship. Otherwise, with the personalities of these two people, it was likely that they would not trust a person so easily. That's right. Shangguan Yingying's eyes lit up. You didn't mention it before, so I didn't think about it. Now that I think about it, it was indeed so. It turned out that it had already been revealed back then, but Beichen and young Master D didn't know about it at that time. This is great. A faint smile appeared on Xiren's face. Beichen has been wanting to find his biological parents all these years. Now that they have finally appeared, I'm sure Beichen will be very happy when he finds out. Shangguan Yingying nodded slightly, and then frowned quietly. That's not right. Since Child D has a powerful background, why did he lose Beichen? I don't know. Xiren spread out his hands. Let Beichen understand this matter himself. No matter what, we are just outsiders. This matter is not something we can intervene in. Right now, I can only hope that Beichen and Hong Zhuang are safe and sound. Now that we know about Beichen's background, as long as they are safe, it is really worth celebrating. Shangguan Yingying's eyes were filled with worry. Along the way, although they were talking, in fact none of them slowed down. Di Yujue and the others were naturally very fast, so the two of them had to use all their skills to be able to keep up. No one was willing to waste any more time on this journey, because if Beichen and Shengguan Yingying were to be in danger because of this little bit of time, none of them wanted to see that. For a time, everyone was hurrying on. After Bailey Hongzhuang studied this restriction for a long time, her eyes suddenly lit up, and a faint smile appeared on her face. Noticing the change in Bailey Hongzhuang's expression, the three beasts immediately rushed to Bailey Hongzhuang's side and asked curiously, "Master, did you find something?" Chapter 41-44. As Bailey Hongzhuang's voice fell, the faces of the three beasts were filled with a hint of surprise. "Master, I knew you would be able to think of a way." As she spoke, Xiaohei could not help but turn towards Bai Long provocatively. She raised her brows as if to say, "What do you think? I told you that my master could do it, right? You just didn't believe me. Now you have no choice but to admit it." However, Bai Long could not be bothered with Xiaohei's provocation at this moment. She was completely immersed in Bailey Hongzhuang's claim that she could break the restriction. Instantly, Bai Long shuddered and rushed towards Bailey Hongzhuang. Her large, pitch-black eyes flickered with a thick light of anticipation. "What did you say? Say it again?" Bailey Hongzhuang stared at Bai Long, who could not hide her excitement. She also noticed the trace of fear in the depths of Bai Long's eyes. She was clearly afraid of being disappointed. Bai Long has been here for far too many years. Perhaps she has already forgotten what the outside world looks like. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled and nodded at the thought of this. "You heard me right. I found a way to break this restriction." "What kind of method have you found? How do you break this restriction?" Bai Long's eyes flickered with a bright light. They were as resplendent as the stars in the sky. At this moment, her gaze towards Bailey Hongzhuang was filled with admiration and anticipation. Bai Long has been here for so many years, yet she has not been able to find a way to break this restriction. However, Bailey Hongzhuang has only been here for a few days, and she has already found a way to break this restriction. Isn't this a little too shocking? I've said it before. This restriction is actually a type of formation. As long as we can find a way to break this formation, we'll naturally be able to break this restriction. You mean to say that you found a way to break this formation? Bailey Hongzhuang nodded gently. That's right, I found a way. However, in order to break this restriction and bring you out of here, we'll need your help. Bai Long was shocked. Her eyes flashed with astonishment. My help? How can I help? Although I have found a way to break it, the expert who set up this restriction is simply too strong. My current cultivation base is not enough. Only by borrowing some of my power will you be able to break this restriction. Her ink-black phoenix eyes shone with a wise and far-sighted light. She had already found a way, but she needed to gather a certain amount of power. Fortunately, this power was not limited to one person. They could work together. Is what you said true? The white dragon still had some doubts. Suddenly, such a young lady appeared and said that she could break the restriction. Moreover, she also needed to help. Could it be that the person he had been waiting for all this time was such a master? Wasn't this strength a little too weak? However, she only remembered that whoever could take her away would be her master. She did not mention how to take her away. In that case, this method was not wrong. Of course it's true. Seeing that the white dragon was still doubting his master, the white lion's eyes were filled with displeasure. It's fine if you don't believe me. Anyway, you should be the one staying here. Bailey Hongzhuang did not say a word either. She only stared quietly at the white dragon. This was a matter for the white dragon to consider. If the white dragon was unwilling, there was nothing she could do. Chapter 41-45. Bai Long has not been out for a long time. Now she felt that as long as she could get out, she was willing to try any method. Furthermore, Bailey Hongzhuang did not look like a bad person. Furthermore, although the three beasts' attitude towards her needs to be improved, they were still acceptable overall. Therefore, she did not reject Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. Next, Bailey Hongzhuang told Bai Long how to break the restriction. The process was very simple. She would find the point to break the restriction, and she only needed Bai Long's help to inject energy. As long as the energy has reached a certain level, it would naturally be able to break the restriction directly. She had been here for a few days, and did not know when Bewitching would finish accepting the inheritance. Everyone must be very worried about her safety during these few days. Therefore, she also hoped that she could break the restriction as soon as possible, so that she could reunite with everyone. I only need to inject energy, right? Bai Long asked. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. That's right. However, this requires a lot of energy. You have to be mentally prepared. I'll do my best. If you're ready, let's begin. All right. Outside the ruins, Li Buoyo and the others had turned the ruins upside down, but they still did not see Bailey Hongzhuang's figure. Everyone felt that it was very strange. I don't believe that this Bailey Hongzhuang can go to heaven and earth, right? She should be in the ruins. It's impossible for her to go anywhere else. Why can't we find her? Qian Feilong could not hide the gloominess on his face. He had spent so much effort only to end up with nothing. One could imagine the gloominess in his heart. Bewitching has gone to accept the inheritance. That's why we can't see him in the ruins. Could Bailey Hongzhuang have gone to accept the inheritance like him? Mu Zhe frowned. Various thoughts flashed through his mind. Although this was not very likely, based on the current situation, he could not think of any other possibility. How is this possible? Li Buoyo immediately denied Mu Zhe's guess. I don't believe that this Bailey Hongzhuang is so powerful. This inheritance clearly belongs to Bewitching. How could she have the opportunity to receive the inheritance? Then why is this happening? There are no other places in the ruins. Could it be that Bailey Hongzhuang has already left? I don't know. Li Buoyo's expression also revealed a bit of helplessness. From the bottom of his heart, he was unwilling to admit how powerful Bailey Hongzhuang was, but the situation in front of him was really inexplicable. Let's wait here. It's been a while since Bewitching received the inheritance. Even if we can't wait for Bailey Hongzhuang, we can wait for Bewitching. Li Buoyo looked at Qian Feilong and Mu Zhe. He was most worried that Qian Feilong and the others would choose to leave. Once they left, he would naturally not be able to avenge himself. He was really unwilling to accept this situation. Fortunately, Qian Feilong and Mu Zhe had no intention of leaving. They immediately nodded. Okay, we'll wait here. Hearing this, Li Buoyo was relieved. After Bailey Hongzhuang found the formation eye, she immediately informed the white dragon to inject energy. Chapter 41-46. After Bai Long had poured his elemental energy into the eye of the formation, everyone could feel that the restrictive barrier was beginning to fluctuate. Bai Long's eyes lit up when he noticed this. It seems that Bailey Hongzhuang had not lied to him. This was really effective against the restrictive barrier. However, as he poured more and more elemental energy into the restrictive barrier, Bai Long only noticed that the restrictive barrier was fluctuating less and less. However, it was still not completely broken. His expression turned ugly. It can't be right? Wasn't this restriction a little too abnormal? Even with so much energy, it still can't be broken. How far do we have to go? When Bailey Hongzhuang and the three beasties noticed this, their eyes flashed with astonishment. The amount of energy required was just too shocking. It seems that it's not that easy to become a dragon's master. Xiao He sighed ruefully. Although she had already guessed that it would not be that simple, this scene had still exceeded her expectations. Bai Long's previous master must have been very powerful. With such a powerful restrictive barrier, he must have been a rare expert. Bailey Hongzhuang slowly spoke. Even from the perspective of her past life, this person was definitely an expert. An extraordinary expert. Bai Long noticed that Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest were still in the mood to chat at a time like this. He could not help but say, "Stop chatting. Come and help me. I can't hold on much longer." Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang and the three beasties realized that Bai Long's expression was extremely ugly. It was obvious that he could not hold on much longer. When they saw this, they immediately joined the team that was pouring their elemental energy into the restrictive barrier. Through the restrictive barrier's fluctuating condition, they could already sense that it would not take long for the restrictive barrier to disappear completely. Before that happens, they must give it their all. Otherwise, if they fail, all their previous efforts would be wasted. After Bailey Hongzhuang and the three beasties joined in, the restrictive barrier's fluctuations became more and more intense. Bai Long heaved a sigh of relief. His energy was almost at its limit. It was a good thing that he could breathe a sigh of relief now. However, this was only temporary. This was because Bailey Hongzhuang and the others had discovered that the array core was simply a bottomless pit. The amount of energy required was simply too great. Xiao He could not help but cry out when she saw Bai Long's gradually pale face. Bai Long, you must hold on. Although their strength was not bad, they still had to rely on the white dragon's strength. If the white dragon could not do it, they would not be able to complete it either. White Dragon nodded, his eyes shining with determination and persistence. I will persevere until the end. She had waited for so many years and finally had a glimmer of hope. She absolutely could not give up just like that. If she missed this opportunity, she didn't know when she would be able to see the light again. She had been here for too long, and she really didn't want to stay here any longer. Therefore, the white dragon persisted until her vision turned black. Bailey Hongzhuang caught the white dragon, but found that a mark suddenly appeared on her and the white dragon. Seeing this, her eyes couldn't help but flash with deep astonishment. This is... Bai Shi's eyes also flashed with astonishment. Master, have you formed a contract with Bai Long? When did you complete it? Chapter 41-47. Bailey Hongzhuang's face was filled with confusion. She had not signed a contract with the white dragon at all. How could she have completed the contract all of a sudden? I didn't do this. I don't know what's going on either. The three beasties were stunned when they heard Bailey Hongzhuang's words. However, they did not suspect anything. They knew that Bailey Hongzhuang did not have the time to do all this. This sudden situation was indeed a little too strange. Although I don't know what's going on, perhaps the white dragon will know. Unfortunately, it's now unconscious. Let's put it into the chaos ring first. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at the unconscious white dragon. She had needed too much energy, and the white dragon had overdrawn its energy. If this had happened in the past, Bailey Hongzhuang would have been worried that the white dragon would be in trouble after it found out about the secret of the chaos ring. However, the white dragon had signed a master-servant contract with her and would never betray her. Hence, she no longer needed to worry about this. The three beasties nodded when they heard Bailey Hongzhuang's words. Master, the white dragon should be all right, right? Don't worry, it's fine. It's just that it's exhausted too much energy and needs to rest for a while to recover. That's good. A smile appeared on Xiao Hei's face. When it wakes up and realizes that it's out of the chaos ring, it'll be very happy. As soon as she said this, Bailey Hongzhuang, Xiao Bai, and Bai Shi seemed to have imagined the scene that would unfold. They found it rather funny. Although the white dragon pretended to be mature in front of them, the details that it had inadvertently revealed told them that the white dragon's thoughts were actually very simple. It might even jump up in excitement when the time comes. Now that we've rescued the white dragon, let's hurry up and meet up with everyone. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes flashed with a bright light. She had inexplicably disappeared for so many days. Presumably, everyone was very concerned about her. She had to meet up with everyone first, so that everyone could rest assured. The three beasties also nodded, and immediately followed behind Bailey Hongzhuang, as they walked towards the main hall in front of them. So much time has passed. I wonder if Bewitching has finished receiving his inheritance? I wonder how powerful he will become after receiving the inheritance. A curious look appeared on Xiao Hei's face. Bewitching is really something. Ever since his physique changed, he has become more and more powerful. In the future, with Bewitching protecting Master, we don't have to worry anymore. Bai Shi smiled. Thinking back to how Bewitching was unable to improve his cultivation, he felt extremely emotional. After Bailey Hongzhuang and the three beasts rushed back to the main hall, they found that there was no one in the main hall. Seeing this, the man and the three beasts couldn't help but be stunned. Their faces were full of confusion. Ying. Ziren? Bailey Hongzhuang tried to call out their names in the main hall, but there was no response. For a moment, her expression couldn't help but change. Where's everyone? Why isn't anyone here? Xiao Bai scanned her surroundings. Her eyes were filled with confusion. Logically speaking, since Master has yet to emerge, everyone shouldn't have left. Chapter 41-48. Bailey Hongzhuang's ink-black phoenix-like eyes flickered with the light of deep thought. Her pretty face was solemn as she carefully observed her surroundings. Even though she did not know what had happened, she had a vague feeling that something must have happened, which was why Xiren and the others had left. Based on her understanding of Xiren and the others, even if everyone had gone to look for her, logically speaking, one of them would have stayed behind to wait for her in case she appeared. It was impossible for all of them to have left. However, even though she was mentally prepared for this, Bailey Hongzhuang still held on to a sliver of hope that nothing had happened to everyone. Then, she and the three beasties walked out of the Great Hall and began to search for everyone. However, they did not hear any response even after searching the entire Great Hall for a while. When they returned to the Great Hall, both she and the three beasties had a rather gloomy expression on their faces. What happened? Why are they not here? Xiao Hei's eyes flickered with a puzzled light. She could not figure it out no matter how hard she thought about it. Previously, when they had gone to the White Dragon's place, this place had clearly been very safe. Furthermore, based on what the owner of the ruins had done, he did not have any murderous intent towards these young cultivators. Logically speaking, this could not possibly be related to the owner of the ruins. If that was the case, could it be that other cultivators had entered this place? However, everyone had clearly left at that time, so who would come here again? If my guess is correct, I'm afraid that it's the members of the Crimson Moon sect. Bailey Hongzhuang's expression was gloomy. Apart from this possibility, she could not think of any other. Li Boyo must hate them to the core. Back then, she had been rather puzzled as to why he had left so easily. She had thought that he had lost all hope and had been taught a lesson. That was why he had chosen to leave. However, based on the current situation, she was afraid that she had underestimated everything. Based on Li Boyo's deep thoughts, his previous actions were probably just to trick Wanyan Ling and the others into leaving. Her heart gradually sank at the thought of this. If the cultivators from the Crimson Moon sect were to rush back, based on their powers, Xiren and the others would certainly face a great deal of pressure. Their chances of survival would also be very small. Thinking of this possibility, Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes gradually sharpened. She only hoped that none of this was real. Otherwise, she would definitely not let Li Boyo and the group of people from the Crimson Moon sect off. However, while her heart was filled with anger, Bailey Hongzhuang also had a trace of fear in her heart. She couldn't imagine what she would do if something happened to Shengguan Yingying and the others. They were all her most cherished friends. Not only her, but Beichen would also not be able to bear it after knowing all this. Master, do you mean that the cultivators of the Crimson Moon sect have returned? Xiao Hei could not help but widen her eyes. There was a hint of fear in her eyes. Other than them, there won't be anyone else, Bailey Hongzhuang said slowly. Wanyan Ling and the others were fellow disciples of the same sect. Naturally, they would not do such a thing. There was no enmity between them and the cultivators of the 100 Flowers Order. Naturally, there was no need for them to do such a thing. Furthermore, the 100 Flowers Order had always been kind to her. This would not benefit them at all. Chapter 41-49. If it's really them, Li Boyo and the others are simply too despicable. Xiao Hei's face was filled with anger. Initially, they had thought that their journey would be very successful. They never thought that such a thing would happen in the end. I also think that Master's judgment is very correct. Aside from this possibility, I'm afraid that there are no other possibilities. What should we do now? Baisher's gaze was complicated. I wonder when they had returned. Could they still be outside the ruins? Even though he was filled with the desire to avenge everyone, based on their current situation, it would be very dangerous for them to face the cultivators from the Crimson Moon sect. After all, only Bailey Hongzhuang was left. Besides, the White Dragon had fallen into a coma. They were no match for them at all. We've been at the White Dragon's place for a few days now. They probably won't keep watch over us, will they? Xiaobai pondered. However, Bailey Hongzhuang gently shook her head. Her expression was filled with certainty. They definitely will. Following Bailey Hongzhuang's words, the three beasts were shocked. Master, according to what you're saying, they're outside the ruins now? Li Buoyo is now a cripple. It wasn't easy for the cultivators from the Crimson Moon sect to agree to avenge him. He won't give up so easily, so he'll definitely choose to wait outside and capture us all in one fell swoop. Her pitch-black phoenix-like eyes flickered with a wise light. Even though there were no clues to prove this, according to Bailey Hongzhuang's judgment, this was definitely the closest possibility to the truth. Based on what you've said, we can't go out now. Xiao Hei's expression has turned serious. If there were so many opponents outside, they would be walking right into a trap if they went out. Xiaobai, shrink your body and go out to take a look. Inform us once you've understood the situation. Bailey Hongzhuang said. She needed to understand the situation before coming up with a plan. I'll go right away. Xiaobai nodded without hesitation. She then shrunk her body and hid in the darkness. Li Buoyo and the others had been waiting outside the ruins. As time passed, their patience gradually dissipated. However, at this moment, they suddenly heard some movements coming from the ruins. After noticing this, everyone's eyes suddenly lit up, and their expressions became spirited. Is this Bailey Hongzhuang or Bewitching? Mu Zhe looked at the door of the ruins thoughtfully. He could only hear some shouts coming from the ruins, but he was unable to determine who it was because it was too far away. It must be Bailey Hongzhuang, Li Buoyo said with certainty. Eldest senior brother, how did you know? Qian Feilong raised his eyebrows. Based on the faint movements that were transmitted over, it was impossible to determine who exactly it was. My intuition. Trust me, it can't be wrong. Li Buoyo was very certain. If it was Bewitching, he would have come out directly because he doesn't know if Bailey Hongzhuang and the others are waiting for him inside. However, this person is obviously shouting for someone. Only Bailey Hongzhuang would do that, because she noticed that when Xiren and the others are gone. Hearing Li Buoyo's words, Mu Zhe and Qian Feilong could not help but look at each other. Their brows furrowed slightly, but they still nodded. Chapter 4150. Let's go in and take a look, Qian Feilong hurriedly said. They had been waiting here for so long for Bailey Hongzhuang to appear. Now that she had finally appeared, they naturally had to act as soon as possible. However, just as everyone was about to move, Li Buoyo raised his right hand and stopped them. No, we can't go in now. Everyone was stunned when they heard this. They looked at Li Buoyo suspiciously, as they could not understand why he would say such a thing. However, Li Buoyo explained his reason for doing so in the next second. We've searched the entire ruins several times, but we couldn't find Bailey Hongzhuang. It's obvious that she has some special method, or entered a special place in the ruins. If we go in like this, she might have hidden herself before we arrive. By then, we'll have wasted our efforts and still won't be able to find her. Hearing this, everyone finally understood. Immediately, their gazes towards Li Buoyo were filled with a trace of emotion. As their eldest senior brother, Li Buoyo had always been brave and resourceful. Many of his strategies had always been devised by Li Buoyo. Now, although Li Buoyo had become an ordinary person who could not cultivate, he was still extraordinarily quick-witted. At least, this was something that they had not thought of before. However, after Li Buoyo mentioned it, they realized that it was indeed the case. Eldest senior brother, what do you think we should do then? Mu Zhe asked. It's very simple. We'll retreat a distance away from here and wait for Bailey Hongzhuang to come out before we take action. Li Buoyo's lips slowly curled into a smile. He wanted to see how Bailey Hongzhuang would be able to escape from his grasp this time. All right, everyone nodded without hesitation and followed Li Buoyo's arrangement. Xiaobai carefully arrived at the entrance of the ruins. According to its master's judgment, Li Buoyo and the rest would definitely be waiting here. Therefore, even though its body was very small and would not be easily discovered, it still moved slowly. After all, the cultivators of the Crimson Moon sect were all experts. As long as it moved slightly, it would be noticed by everyone. However, When it arrived at the entrance of the ruin, it realized that there was no movement at all, and there was no figure in sight. After looking around carefully, Xiaobai couldn't help but walk out of the ruins. She looked around and found that there was indeed no trace of him. Seeing this, Xiaobai could not help but frown. A trace of doubt and contemplation appeared on her face. Why is there no one here? Xiaobai could not understand. Then why did Xiren and the others disappear? Or did the Crimson Moon sect members leave after killing them? Xiaobai quickly returned to Bailey Hongzhuang's side. It had to report this news to its master as soon as possible. After hearing all this from Xiaobai, Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but frown. Was my judgment wrong? Xiaobai, did you really look carefully? Is there really no one here? Xiaohei could not help but ask again. Xiaobai nodded. I've walked around in a circle. There really isn't any movement. Chapter 4151. Master, could it be that when Xiren and the others had just left not too long ago? Baisher inquired. At the moment, they had no idea when Xiren and the others had left. They could have left a few days ago, or they could have just left. I think that the Crimson Moon sect might have left after attacking Yingying and the others, Xiaohei said. What should we do now? The three beasts furrowed their brows. Right now, they couldn't figure out what had happened. They wouldn't be able to understand anything if they stayed in the ruins, unless they went out to take a look. However, if they went out, they would have to worry about whether there would be any problems. It was really troublesome. Bailey Hongzhuang pondered for a moment before saying, let's go out and take a look. They would only be able to understand the situation after leaving the ruins. It would be best if they could find traces of Xiren and the others nearby. Seeing that Bailey Hongzhuang had made her decision, the three beasts expressed their agreement and followed Hongzhuang out of the ruins. After Bailey Hongzhuang walked out of the ruins, she realized that the situation was just as Xiaobai had said. There was no movement in the surroundings at all. After checking around, she realized that there was no aura in the surroundings. Clearly, no one was hiding here. Bailey Hongzhuang realized this, and the suspicion in her eyes grew even more intense. She believed that her previous judgment was not wrong, and she also believed that Li Buoyo would not give up until he killed her. So where did the problem lie? Could it be that the people who had returned were not Li Buoyo and the others, but someone else? At that moment, Bailey Hongzhuang could not understand everything. Master, let's go around and look for traces of Xiren and the others, Baisher said slowly. The white lion spoke slowly with a complicated expression. It did not dare to speak too clearly. If when Xiren and the others had really died here, they would definitely be able to find their corpses nearby. After all, there was no need for the other party to destroy the corpses. Bailey Hongzhuang naturally understood what Baisher meant, and immediately nodded. All right, let's go and take a look. In the next moment, one man and three beasts began to move, searching for traces of Xiren and the others. However, after searching for a while they did not find anything. For such a situation, Bailey Hongzhuang's heart was still somewhat happy. At the very least, the fact that he had not discovered them meant that there was still a possibility that Xiren and the others were still alive. Bailey Hongzhuang could only hope that everyone had been distracted by something, and that nothing had happened. After all, judging from the surrounding situation, there seemed to be no traces of a fight. This made Bailey Hongzhuang feel a little more hopeful. She really couldn't imagine how she would accept all this if something happened to Shengguan Yingying and the others. Master, there aren't any traces around here. Could it be that things aren't as complicated as we thought? Xiaohei couldn't help but ask. Chapter 4152. It would be great if that was really the case. Bailey Hongzhuang sighed, but her expression did not reveal the slightest bit of joy. However, I have a feeling that things are not that simple. Something must have happened. Otherwise, Xiren and the others would have left behind a note for me before leaving. They would not have disappeared without a trace. She had this kind of intuition, because when Xiren and the others had disappeared too suddenly, and did not leave any traces behind, this was also a kind of problem. However, she had not discovered anything, so she could only think this way. She hoped that something urgent had happened, and that was why Xiren and the others had left in a hurry. Or perhaps they had discovered something in the ruins and did not have time to leave a message for her before leaving. It was just like how she had gone to the White Dragon's place. She did not have time to say anything. Actually, this was not impossible. After all, these ruins were very strange. No one else had been able to find the White Dragon's secret chamber, but she had. This meant that there might be other secret chambers in the ruins. Soon after, Bailey Hongzhuang and the three beasties searched the area for the others, but still did not find any trace of them. However, just as they were about to leave, Bailey Hongzhuang suddenly noticed a piece of black cloth on the ground. Seeing this, Bailey Hongzhuang could not help but walk over and pick up the cloth. After examining it carefully, she identified the owner of the cloth. "This is Yunjua's clothes." Bailey Hongzhuang slowly spoke as her expression turned solemn. Mo Yunjua's power has reached the starlight state, but the other party had still been able to cut his clothes. This showed how powerful the other party was. This was definitely a situation that would only occur when they had encountered danger. Bailey Hongzhuang's previous hope of getting lucky immediately disappeared. Indeed, danger had occurred. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, the three beasties could not help but fall into silence. It seems that things are as I've said. The cultivators from the Crimson Moon sect must have returned and attacked them before leaving. I'm afraid that the others are not too far away. The hearts of the woman and the three beasties sank. This was the situation that they did not want to accept the most. Unfortunately, they had no choice but to believe it now. The woman and the three beasties continued to walk forward. After walking for a distance, Bailey Hongzhuang found another piece of cloth. It was still Mo Yunjua's clothes. However, just as the three beasties were about to continue forward, Bailey Hongzhuang suddenly stopped. Something's not right. The three beasties looked at Bailey Hongzhuang in confusion. They did not know what Bailey Hongzhuang meant. "Master, what's the matter?" "Something's not right thing," Bailey Hongzhuang said. If Bailey Hongzhuang, Bailey Hongzhuang Zhuang. Before, Bailey Hongzhuang was so immersed in worrying about everyone's safety that she didn't even think about other possibilities. Of course, Bailey Hongzhuang Zhuang Hongzhuang. "We might have fallen into a trap. Retreat quickly," Bailey Hongzhuang said as she hurriedly retreated. It was obvious that someone had deliberately lured her in a certain direction. Chapter 4153. Just as Bailey Hongzhuang and the three beasties hurriedly retreated, several auras quickly approached them. Bailey Hongzhuang and the three beasties' faces turned ugly when they sensed the approaching auras. "Damn it! These fellows are actually luring us in on purpose." Xiaohei could not help but curse out loud. She never thought that such a possibility would occur. These fellows are far too scheming. Not too long after, Qian Feilong and the rest caught up to them. Noticing this scene, Bailey Hongzhuang's delicate face suddenly showed a trace of dignified disgust. "It's really you." It seems that her initial judgment had been right. The ones who had returned were Li Buoyo and the rest. Li Buoyo flashed a complacent smile when he saw Bailey Hongzhuang in the flesh. "Bailey Hongzhuang, after hiding for so long, we've finally found you in the flesh." Qian Feilong and the rest turned their attention to Bailey Hongzhuang. They were now left with 10 people. Even though Li Buoyo has lost his ability to fight, and another cultivator's leg was injured, and had lost his ability to fight, there were still 8 cultivators who could participate in the battle. Faced with such a situation, Bailey Hongzhuang could only face death. Bailey Hongzhuang stared icily at Li Buoyo. She now felt that Li Buoyo was even more detestable than the deceased Li Yunyu. They were indeed brothers. Even though he had fallen into such dire straits, he still loved to stir up trouble. He was truly detestable. "Where's Yingying and the rest?" Bailey Hongzhuang asked. Even though she had a bad feeling when she saw Yunju's tattered robes earlier on, she would not give up until the very last moment. Besides, she noticed that the Crimson Moon sect's team had lost half of its members. If Mo Yunjue and the others had really fought with the cultivators from the Crimson Moon sect, then the other people from the Crimson Moon sect must have died at the hands of Mo Yunjue. She knew very well that even if the cultivators of the Crimson Moon sect were very powerful, they would not let the Crimson Moon sect have a good time dealing with Mo Yunjue and the others. Shengguan Yingying? Li Buoyou raised his eyebrows and the smile in his eyes deepened. Naturally, he died in our hands. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but frown. Nonsense. You're already at death's door. Why should I lie to you? The corners of Li Buoyou's lips curled up slightly as he looked at Bailey Hongzhuang in ridicule. You don't know, when we killed our way in, they didn't even think that we would come back. However, their reaction speed is not bad. They were actually able to escape to the outside of the ruins. However, even if they managed to escape, it would be of no use. In the end, they would still die in our hands. Qian Feilong and the others laughed along as well. They understood that Li Buoyou had said this because he wanted to make Bailey Hongzhuang feel pain. Once she was in pain, and her condition deteriorated, it would be even easier for them to deal with her. Bailey Hongzhuang's heart sank. If Li Buoyou had said that everyone had died in the ruins, she could conclude that everything that Li Buoyou had said was false. However, everything that Li Buoyou had just said was just as she had expected. She could not find any loopholes in his story. She had no choice but to believe him. Do you have any evidence to prove it? Bailey Hongzhuang asked slowly. Chapter 4154. However, I'm taking this out. You should be able to recognize it, right? As he spoke, Li Buoyou slowly took out a few Qingquan bags. I didn't expect them to have so many things in their Qingquan bags, even though they had just become Penglai Palace's inner palace disciples. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at the Qingquan bags, and her gaze could not help but freeze. Weren't these Xiren and Shengguan Yingying's Qingquan bags? In the next moment, Bailey Hongzhuang's black eyes became deep. A storm was brewing in her eyes, gathering and ready to erupt at any time. A trace of dark red killing intent bloomed in her eyes, like an enchanting datura flower, beautiful but full of danger. She understood that the Qingquan bag was the most precious thing to every cultivator. Many treasures were placed in the Qingquan bag. No one would give up the Qingquan bag until the last moment. Now that the Qingquan bags had fallen into Li Buoyou's hands, then Shengguan Yingying and the others were probably doomed. After seeing this scene, the three beasts' faces became extremely ugly. When they looked at Li Buoyou and the others again, their eyes were burning with murderous intent. These damn guys, they actually killed Xiren and the others. Do you believe me now? Li Buoyou said with a chuckle. Mu Zhe's gaze fell on Li Buoyou. He really admired Li Buoyou's methods. These two Qingquan bags were given to him by Xiren and Shengguan Yingying. After returning, Li Buoyou found out that he had let them go, so he took out the Qingquan bags as an apology. Unexpectedly, Li Buoyou took out the Qingquan bags now, and it became evidence that Xiren and Shengguan Yingying were dead. Looking at Bailey Hongzhuang's sudden change of expression, Li Buoyou felt a burst of joy. He recalled that when he was down and out, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were laughing at him. Now, he finally saw Bailey Hongzhuang's painful expression. You don't have to be too sad. They just died a few days earlier than you. You can go down and accompany them soon. Li Buoyou spread out his hands, and the smile on his face was like that of a demon. As for your lover, after he receives the inheritance, we will immediately send him down to accompany you. We won't let you be alone underground. In your dreams. Haha. Li Buoyou laughed. What? Are you still unwilling to admit this fact? Do you think you can slip away from so many of us? Stop dreaming. Mu Zhe also said. Bailey Hongzhuang, you should have also obtained the inheritance of the ruins before, right? He had always been curious about this. There was clearly no place to hide in the ruins, but Bailey Hongzhuang was still inside, and none of them could find her. However, Bailey Hongzhuang only glanced at Mu Zhe coldly, and was too lazy to reply. Seeing this, Mu Zhe's eyes turned icy cold. Even if you've obtained the inheritance of the ruins, it's useless. This power of darkness will never have the chance to be revealed to the world. You fellows, you'll all die a horrible death. Don't be stubborn. Li Buoyou waved his hand nonchalantly. Now, we'll send you to heaven. Once Li Buoyou had spoken, Qian Feilong, and the others immediately began to move, planning to surround Bailey Hongzhuang. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.